My guest tonight is a unique combination of a modern young mind, steeped in centuries of Indian musical culture and tradition. A child prodigy, he's expanded the boundaries of his musical universe. Composer, Grammy Award winner, actor, teacher, this legendary custodian of the tabla is none other than Ustad Zakir Hussain. I'm delighted indeed to have a rare rendezvous with both Zakir and his wife, Antonia Minnecola Hussain.
The world is rushing by so fast. Let's press the pause and make it last.
Zakir, it's such a pleasure to have you over here. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure to be here.
It's not possible to compress a lifetime's passion and dedication in a mere 30 minutes. And in your case, your journey really began the day after you were born.
That's about right. When I was, probably about a day and a half old, yes. When I was brought back to the house from the hospital and my father took me in his arms, the traditional thing to do is to sing verses from the Quran into the child's ear, and that's the father's job. But instead of doing that, he started singing rhythm syllables in my ear.
And by the time you were 2, no utensil was safe in your house?
No, not at all. I used to just rob whatever I could, whether it was playing on tables or taking the utensils. One of my favorite tools was that lassi churner.
Okay.
Yes.
So your mother had different hopes for you?
Yes, she still does, I think.
And she didn't want you to be a tabla player, did she?
Oh, absolutely, she didn't. I mean, at my time, when we were very young, music was still not considered to be something that you could make a decent living at or a respectable living at. And so my mother herself had seen me go to concerts and come back. As payment, I had food given to me packed. So that was it. That was it. So stuff like that, and she'd seen, and she wanted me to have a better life, a secure future, and so on. And so she really tried her damnedest to make sure that I studied, that I went to school, and focused on being able to have something to fall back on.
But your father encouraged you to
He encouraged me without actually encouraging me.
I understand.
I just wanted to be him. He was God. Yes. He is, as far as I'm concerned. So I just wanted to emulate him in any way possible.
But I believe such was your passion for the tabla that anyone could lure you away with that temptation.
Easily. To the point that I would run away from home for a few days to go and play in some other city. Since I was the only one who spoke English, reading and writing English at home, there was great advantage. Letters would come for my father to come and perform, and I would write back saying, well, he's not available, he's in New York or Paris or wherever.
But his son is there.
But his son, he's good enough, and he'd be glad to come and play, and would you want him? There were many a times when I arrived at the train station and they'd pass me by. They wouldn't know, and they'd expect somebody older and whatnot, and there would be me.
I'm here with my tabla.
With my tabla. And I mean, school shorts even at times.
Jab aap 6 bars ke the, your sister was telling me when you were 6 years old, you nearly ran away with this woman called Pujaran.
Yes, she was one of the ladies who was in our house and would look after us and stuff. And I think I must have been very disgruntled or disappointed with my mother trying to stop me from playing music and stuff. So I told Pujaran, let's just run away. She used to sing a bit. So I told her, you sing and I will play and we'll make a living. Let's just run away from home.
And then you started packing your school bags.
I did pack my school bags and was ready to go. I did that quite a few times.
What stopped you?
Well,
I know what. They said, Khana kaise khaoge?
Khana kaise khayenge, and but deep inside it was not just the food, it was also knowing that what I needed was there. My father, my teacher.
Well, at 18 you were entrenched deeply into this Indian musical scene. What made you decide to go to the US?
Oh, I wanted to wear jeans, I wanted to be a rock and roll star, I wanted to, make $1 million yesterday.
A rock and roll star.
Why not? I mean, everybody
That's
was
great.
into it. I mean, I walked around the streets of Bombay with a boombox on my shoulder listening to Doors and Beatles and whatnot. And I thought that was the way to go and make a whole lot of money and, be famous very quickly. But when I got there was a whole different world altogether.
So, were you disappointed?
I was very uphill at that point. I was living on $25 a week or something and making one vegetable curry pot and then heating it up every day and eating it with bread and whatnot.
Tough times.
Tough times. Very tough times.
But Zakir, by constantly innovating in fusion, rhythm, sounds, you have transcended what used to be an accompanist form of music into an art form by itself. And I think that has been one of your greatest contributions.
Well, I think that contribution of mine has happened because of 2 generations of hard work. It's twofold. And so when people like myself, or some others arrived on the field, the groundwork was laid. Tabla players were not anymore non-entities.
But creating a new place, a new status for your art form, has it been a struggle?
It has been definitely a struggle. You have to realize that, first of all, Indian classical music at one time was a second-class profession. And then within that profession, the tabla player was even more lower on the ladder, and it was very difficult at times. I mean, you didn't even know who was the tabla player on the record. Their names didn't even appear on the marquee or anything, and it was very difficult in terms of struggle. I mean, I was playing with musicians who would not be at all known, and I would be the known person.
That's right.
But then I would have to give in because I was an accompanist, and I'd have to take much less fee because I was an accompanist. Their names had to be big and, stuff like that. And organizers used to talk to me, how can we give you so much money? That other musician you're playing with is taking much less. So you have to take less. And you have to deal with that. And I still come across that kind of situations, even now.
So when you were in San Francisco, you met your wife-to-be.
This I did, yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting her.
So am I.
Such a pleasure to have you over here.
Thank you.
May I call you Tony?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me, East and West, how did the twain meet?
Well, I got to California, and I'd been at the Manhattan School of Music and the Cleveland Institute of Music really briefly, both places. And I wanted to sort of round out my own education because I was always pretty much a scholar and a seeker and hard work. Work's always been important to me, so I thought I don't know anything about Indian classical music, and I went to visit Ali Akbar Khan Sahib to tell him that I wanted to study dance, and that's when I met Zakir. He happened to be there that night.
Yeah, I still remember that.
He was sitting in the corner, and
So what struck you first about Zakir?
I thought he was very sweet. I thought that I knew him really well right away. One of those things that when you meet someone you think, oh, it's so nice to see you again, kind of like that.
What did you think of his plans for being a rock and roll star?
Well, of course, realizing it's everyone's fantasy, I think almost everybody's fantasy, that I could accept. But then when I discovered Indian classical music for myself, and I heard him play with Nikhil Banerjee the first time, and I'd known he was playing in this band Shanti, I went to him and said, "What are you doing playing this music? You're a great classical artist. You should be doing this," and he was, obviously, but
I was getting experience. That is what I was doing.
But you yourself were learning dancing, weren't you?
Yes.
Indian dancing. Tell me about it.
Well, I trained in California for 10 years.
Do you still perform? Do you practice?
Yes, I do perform, and luckily I've become, I'm asked to dance at festivals and teach, or, you know, bring Kathak to the schools, or and I get a chance to dance with Zakir, as my lighting director says, you know, you've got the best band in the world.
Yeah, you better believe it too. And
so
cheap at that.
Very cheap.
You get paid for doing it.
But you also know the bowl and of the Bhav Kathak, don't you?
Yeah, sure. You know, pure dance bowls, or tabla bowls. Data ketunga, dhagedi keta, dhadinta, teta kedata katunga, takidaka, tadakadagarina.
Yeah.
So did you fall in friendship first or love first?
I think it was kind of a hesitant friendship on Tony's part. On my part, it was more, okay, let's really be friends, kind of a thing. And I would stand outside her dance class, waiting for it to finish so that I could meet up with her. And well, she was more like, who's this guy? And, you know, more interested in dealing with her studies of dance. And, you know, she was more focused in that area. Me, I had all the time in the world. And of course, I kind of maneuvered myself to be able to run into each other at just a precise moment.
All timing, no?
It's all timing, you know. It's, you know, you born with it and you deal with it.
And it works,
It
doesn't
works.
it? So when did it turn to love? I mean,
I think
Pretty
so.
quickly, yeah.
Very, very quickly.
A few months, I think.
Yeah. For some reason, it was very clear that Tony would be the person I would focus, you know, the rest of my life on. And, you know, we kind of knew each other. And I think a year after or so, we moved into a house. No?
That's right.
Yeah, he's great. It's okay to talk about it on TV.
you're married now. No problem.
No problem. Simi will edit it out.
You hope. So you got married actually 8 years later, didn't you?
7 years after we met.
And how did your family feel about this, about the marriage?
Well, my father passed away, had already died, and my mother was wanting us to get married, I think, but yet she had a lot of misgivings, I think, to be really honest.
Yes.
In the beginning, and I thought India was just too many worlds away. And
She only recently accepted the fact that we have phones in India.
No, but I can imagine, even though you have music and dance in common, the backgrounds are completely different.
And also being a musician, not that she is from a musical family herself, and she can appreciate music. She loves music, but he's gone so much, and that always worried her. And I think that was something that I grew up. I remember hearing my father saying this to me as I grew up as a young girl: never marry a musician. They're never home.
Music or musicians or that profession was looked at with, you know, a slight hesitation as something that one would connect with or interact with. It was always like musician, but what does he do for a living?
Right.
I mean, that was always the case, and whether it was America, whether it was India, it didn't matter. So in that sense, yes, she was a bit apprehensive and hesitant, but the difference is that there one allows one's kids to be able to choose their own path and then support them through that choice. But in India, it's a little bit more difficult to convince, at least at that time, your parents to be able to accept your choice of what you have chosen and who is supposed to be your mate. And in my family, that was really the first mixed marriage. So more than my father, it was my mother who had a tough time with it. And it was very difficult for her, being a devout Muslim.
But you didn't tell her, did you?
No, we didn't tell her until I was already married. But my father was there. He married us off in the Muslim ceremony. And but for the civil ceremony, which was the first one, no one really. I mean,
No one knew.
We just went and did it one day.
We got a little tired of the resistance, the reaction, you know. It was sort of like, oh God, you know, leave us alone, let's just go get married. And
My father was fine. I mean, you know, he knew that it was more important that we...
He was worried, I think. He was a little worried.
Yeah.
Parents have anxieties, I think. They have an anxiousness about things working out. You know, I think he knew he had to explain it at home. And
But he took on the responsibility of explaining it to your mother, didn't he?
I think he did.
yeah.
I think the way he explained it was this way. He came home and said, well, it's done and just live with it. But I think over the years when my mother met her, she understood and liked the person, and she sort of worked her way beyond those veils of tradition or religions or whatever it is, and found that the person was the most important aspect of this relationship. And she really loves Tony and thinks the world of her.
And my mother adores Zakir.
Yeah,
absolutely adores him. I mean, she just thinks he's the greatest. Absolutely.
Oh, that husband of yours has magical fingers, she says.
But once you were married, did it create any strains or pressures, the fact that you both were from different countries, different cultures? Was there ever any problem adjusting to it?
And as far as these different traditions or religion or culture or customs, I don't think either of one even thought about it for an instant. That was never a contention or a point of a discussion in our relationship. It only came up because others were worried about it. I mean, I never thought about it. I never thought that Tony was a Catholic. I mean, I spent most of my life in a Catholic school.
Yeah,
so to me, it was quite normal and home-like and no problem. I mean,
and also because I come from such a traditional kind of a family, I think that to meet a man who has the same kind of devotion to his family that I do, I respect that, and I like that, actually, because I certainly wouldn't want to be with a man who wasn't close to his own family, because then he wouldn't want me to be close to my own family. He couldn't understand that then. And also then having children, how do we treat those children? What kind of security and what kind of a base do we provide for them? The traditions aren't so dissimilar. There were a lot of things that I understood about, let's say, the Indian mentality or Indian families that I learned, let's say, from my own grandparents. Certain ways that I would act or would not act that were not typically American, coming from an Italian-American family.
Yeah, and I think our parents noticed that. They noticed that we have the makings of being able to, just migrate to each other's tradition and be totally at home in it.
Your marriage is interrupted by geographical logistics. You live in California. He travels, performs 150 concerts a year. So it must be very difficult to make family life succeed in that sense. How do you make it work?
Well, how do you make it work?
Well, let's see.
I mean, Tony had to make a lot of adjustment in terms of keeping that connection with the tradition. I mean, I used to leave America and come to India and stay here 3 months, 4 months while she was there, alone, and fending for herself. And I was here and playing concerts and doing this. And at times it was difficult in the sense that, I mean, I started off with very hard work, very little money, and very little to live on. And there were times when they had to really scrounge, and really, have budgets and live very frugally. And but she managed. It's simply so that I could establish myself in this country, so that actually that's paid off now.
She gave you the space and the freedom to do that.
She gave me the space and freedom to do it, and in some ways she had to curb her career in that way, because she had to stay home and she had to concentrate on kids, and in that sense she also brought up our kids, with the kids knowing who I am. And I wasn't a stranger anymore. I wasn't a stranger at all. Whenever I came home, they knew it was Dad who's home.
They were very mindful that Papa had a great work to do, and we wouldn't want to keep him from that work.
That's my job. It's my living. My 9 to 5 is go out and to another city and live. I commute, and sometimes the commute is longer than one day.
Have you never resented his having to stay away from the family for long spells?
Sure, I'm human. I mean, of course I've resented it. I've resented it, of course. I mean, I've gone through my depressed periods and felt sad, felt lonely.
Angry.
Very angry. I felt desolate. I felt deserted. It's hard. And then with children, you sort of have to also keep explaining. But I remember one night that I was very, very upset. I was just sitting on the sofa, and and the kids were, maybe they were about 6 and 11, that age, and And Anissa said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Oh, I miss Papa, and I don't know. It's just so, I feel so." It was the winter time, you know, it was dark, it was raining, that thing,
Cold.
you know. And she said, "Mom, you make us feel so degraded." I remember that she used that word. "Mom, you make us feel," she's 11, you know, 10 or 11. "You make us feel so degraded. Who are we?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you happy to be with us? We're together," you know. And so it's things like that that happen that make you realize that day-to-day life, especially with children, is very important every moment, you know.
But then I also, you know, in some ways, if possible, I mean, I was always there for the occasions, of the birthdays or school concerts or anything.
But because of your marriage, there must be a crossover of cultures to an extent. In what ways have you become more American, and in what ways has she become more Indian?
I don't know if I've become American, but I know that I have actually learned to believe in someone's tradition and someone's family values or roots. And in this case, being Tony, I actually believe in her way of life, whatever it is. And I believe it to be right for me and right for my kids. So it's not a problem for me if my kids have to be baptized, for instance. It's quite all right. Or, you know, if they, you know, have to
have hakika.
Have hakikas, it's all right for her.
A feminine question now.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you look after your hands?
My hands? Oh, boy. I play tabla. That's how I look after them. I think the music is healing. Music is healing. It's very strange. When I'm playing Western drums and Conga drums and African drums and everything, my hands crack.
They suffer.
And they suffer.
Not from tabla.
As soon as I start just playing tabla, they heal.
I have one big regret. I should have asked you to bring the tabla this evening.
This you didn't do. But so what? I mean, let's find something to play. Why don't I play?
Will you?
Well, what's this? Let's see.
Chocolate.
Chocolates. I'm not going to eat them. Here, you take these. Let's see if I can play this. What about this, huh? Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank
you so much for playing.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I wish you a lot of happiness.
Thank you.
Every happiness.
I think we enjoyed being here.
Thank you so much for this rendezvous.
My pleasure.